There are mornings when the heart wakes before the body does. Mornings when the soul has already begun whispering questions before the sun has even touched the curtains. We rise carrying silent burdens, hidden fears, unfinished prayers, and dreams that tremble between hope and uncertainty. Yet, even in those fragile moments, there is a sacred truth waiting to meet us. God has never abandoned the road beneath our feet. Today is not just another sunrise. It is another opportunity for divine direction. Another chance to place our trembling hands into the steady hands of the Creator. For every step we take without God becomes heavy with confusion. But every step surrendered to Him becomes lighter with grace. When the Lord leads, valleys do not destroy us. Storms do not define us. Delays do not discourage us. His wisdom becomes the lamp before our feet, and the quiet voice behind us saying, "This is the way, walk in it." Beloved, there are crossroads in life where human understanding simply cannot carry us. There are moments when logic grows weary and strength grows thin, but heaven specializes in guiding tired hearts. God sees dangers we cannot see. He knows the doors meant for us and the ones that would break us. He understands the timing of every blessing, every lesson, and every breakthrough. That is why this morning prayer is not merely about asking God for things. It is about asking Him to lead us completely. Perhaps today you are seeking clarity about your future. Perhaps you are carrying anxiety about your family, your finances, your health, or your purpose. Maybe you feel lost in a season you never expected to enter, yet even here God is still directing footsteps. He is still opening paths in the wilderness. He is still making crooked places straight. And sometimes His greatest guidance comes not through thunder, but through gentle peace resting quietly upon the soul. Do not fear the unknown moments ahead of you today. The God who created the stars also watches over your smallest decisions. He goes before you into every meeting, every conversation, every challenge, and every unseen battle. He knows where favor is waiting. He knows where protection is needed. He knows where healing must begin. And when you invite Him into your day, ordinary hours become sacred ground. This morning, let your heart become still enough to hear Him. Let your spirit become humble enough to follow Him. For there is power in surrender. There is peace in trusting God with every step instead of only the emergencies. The Lord is not asking you to have all the answers today. He is simply asking you to walk with Him. And as this day unfolds, may your soul remember this everlasting promise. When God leads, you will never walk alone. There comes a sacred moment in every life when the soul grows tired of pretending it knows the way. A moment when all the maps we have drawn with our own hands begin to fade beneath the weight of disappointment, confusion, and unanswered questions. Human understanding, no matter how polished, eventually reaches its limit. It stumbles in the dark corners of grief. It trembles before uncertainty. It cannot always explain why doors close, why prayers linger unanswered, or why storms rise without warning. And yet, even there, standing in the middle of our not knowing, God whispers gently to the weary heart, "Trust me." That kind of trust is not shallow. It is not the kind that dances only in sunshine and disappears when thunder arrives. True trust is born in deep waters. It grows when life does not make sense. It rises when tears become the language of the night and faith becomes the only bridge left across the morning. Trusting God's direction means believing His eyes can see farther than ours ever could. It means understanding that the Creator of heaven and earth is not confused by the chapters that confuse us. Too often we cling tightly to our own understanding because it gives us the illusion of control. We want to know where every road leads before we take the first step. We want guarantees before obedience. We want certainty before surrender. But God has never asked His children to walk by sight alone. He asks us to walk by faith. Faith is the courage to keep moving when the destination has not yet revealed itself. Faith is placing your hand in God's hand while the future remains hidden behind the curtain of tomorrow. There are people listening to this prayer today who are exhausted from trying to carry the burden of figuring everything out. You have spent sleepless nights calculating possibilities, replaying conversations, and fearing outcomes that have not even happened. Your mind has become a battlefield crowded with worry and what-ifs. But beloved, there is freedom waiting for you in surrender. There is peace waiting when you finally admit that you were never meant to carry tomorrow alone. God does not guide us to confuse us. He guides us to protect us. Sometimes the closed door you cried over was the very door that would have broken your spirit. Sometimes the delay you resented was heaven's mercy preparing you for something greater. Sometimes the silence you feared was God teaching you how to trust His heart when His hand was not yet visible. We live in a world that worships self-reliance. People are taught to trust their instincts above all else, to depend solely upon their own wisdom, to believe that strength means never needing guidance. But the strongest souls are often the ones humble enough to kneel. The wisest hearts are the ones willing to say, Lord, I do not know the way, but you do. There is something beautiful about a life fully surrendered to divine direction. Such a life no longer panics at every unexpected turn because it understands that God can redirect what man cannot repair. A surrendered heart stops measuring life only by immediate results and begins trusting eternal purpose. It learns that God sees the entire tapestry while we see only tangled threads. And oh, how easy it is to trust God when prayers are answered quickly. How easy it is to sing songs of faith when blessings overflow and the path ahead is smooth. But the real test of trust comes when heaven feels quiet, when the doctor's report shakes your confidence, when relationships fall apart, when opportunities disappear, when the future becomes unfamiliar territory. It is there in the wilderness seasons that trust becomes holy. The children of God have always known wilderness places. Moses stood before a sea with no visible escape. Abraham walked toward an unknown land guided only by promise. Esther stepped into danger carrying faith larger than fear. And still today, ordinary people are being called to trust extraordinary grace in impossible situations. Perhaps your own heart stands in such a place now. Maybe you have prayed for direction but still feel uncertain. Maybe you are waiting for answers that have not yet arrived. Maybe you are carrying dreams that seem delayed beyond understanding. Yet even now, God is working beneath the surface of what you cannot see. Heaven does not stop moving simply because your eyes cannot trace its motion. One of the hardest lessons in life is discovering that understanding is not always required for obedience. Sometimes God will ask you to move before you fully comprehend why. Sometimes He will lead you away from comfort toward purpose. Sometimes He will remove familiar things because your destiny cannot grow inside yesterday's limitations. But here is the miracle hidden inside surrender. When you trust God's direction, fear begins to lose its authority over your life. Anxiety no longer sits upon the throne of your thoughts. You begin to rest in the assurance that the one leading you is faithful enough to finish what He started. The Lord is not careless with your future. Every step He orders carries wisdom deeper than human reasoning. He knows which relationships strengthen your spirit and which ones slowly poison your peace. He knows which opportunities align with your calling and which distractions only glitter on the surface. He knows the difference between what feels good temporarily and what is truly good eternally. And sometimes God's direction will challenge your comfort. He may lead you into forgiveness when bitterness feels easier. He may ask you to wait when impatience burns within you. He may tell you to release what you desperately wanted to keep, yet every divine instruction carries love within it. God does not guide His children to harm them. He guides them to grow them. Trusting God also means trusting His timing. Human understanding often rushes ahead, demanding immediate answers and instant results. But God moves with eternal wisdom. He is never late, even when we feel forgotten. The seed beneath the soil may appear lifeless for a season, but hidden growth is still taking place. In the same way, your prayers may seem delayed, but heaven is still preparing what your spirit needs. Beloved, there will be days when you cannot trace God's hand. Days when tears blur your vision and questions outnumber answers. Yet hold on to this truth with all your strength. God's direction is not dependent upon your understanding. He remains faithful even when your emotions fluctuate. He remains steady when life feels unstable. He remains present in every valley, every storm, every uncertain dawn. And perhaps that is the deepest beauty of faith. Not that we always understand the journey, but that we continue walking with God anyway. We keep praying, we keep believing, we keep trusting that the author of our story knows how every chapter will unfold. So this morning, release the burden of trying to control every outcome. Lay down the exhausting need to understand everything before moving forward. Let God be God. Let His wisdom become greater than your fear. Let His voice become louder than your doubts. For the same God who guides rivers to the sea and calls stars each by name is more than able to guide your life. He sees what you cannot see. He knows what you do not know. And if He is leading you, then even uncertain roads can become sacred journeys filled with grace. Trust Him when the answer is delayed. Trust Him when the road changes unexpectedly. Trust Him when your own understanding reaches its limit. Because sometimes the greatest miracle is not God changing the situation immediately, but God teaching the soul how to walk peacefully through it. And when you finally arrive at the place God prepared for you, you will look back over every confusing turn, every painful delay, every unanswered question, and realize that His direction was never failing you at all. It was saving you, shaping you, and leading you home. There is a quiet ache hidden inside the human heart. A longing deeper than ambition, older than fear, stronger than pride. It is the longing to know that our steps matter, that the roads we choose are not empty wanderings, that somewhere above the noise of this hurried world, a loving God is still whispering direction to souls willing to listen. Every day we are faced with decisions. Some appear small and harmless, while others arrive carrying the weight of destiny upon their shoulders. A word spoken too quickly can wound a spirit for years. A door entered too soon can lead to sorrow. A relationship embraced without wisdom can drain the light from a once hopeful soul. And because life is woven together by countless choices, we cannot afford to move through it blindly. We need divine guidance not only for the great storms of life, but also for the ordinary moments that quietly shape who we become. Too many people wait until disaster strikes before they seek God. They pray only when the valley grows dark or when pain becomes unbearable. But there is beauty in a heart that seeks God before the crisis comes. There is strength in a spirit that says, Lord, guide me, even when the road appears smooth. Because the truth is, what looks peaceful to human eyes may still contain hidden danger, and what appears difficult may actually be the path toward purpose. Seeking divine guidance means inviting God into every corner of life, not just the sanctuary on Sunday morning. Not just the desperate midnight prayers whispered through tears, but every conversation, every opportunity, every relationship, every dream, every decision. It means understanding that God cares about the details we often overlook. He cares about the condition of your heart while you work, while you speak, while you love, while you wait. There is a sacred humility required to ask for guidance. Pride tells us we already know enough. Pride convinces us that independence is strength. But humility kneels before heaven and admits, Lord, without you I may lose my way. And that confession is not weakness, it is wisdom. Some of the greatest heartbreaks in life are born from decisions made without peace. We rush ahead because emotions are loud. We cling to what feels familiar instead of what is right. We follow crowds instead of conviction. We mistake urgency for destiny. Yet God does not lead through confusion and chaos. His guidance often arrives quietly, like morning light slipping through the window after a long night of darkness. Beloved, the voice of God is rarely found in frantic noise. It is found in stillness, in prayer, in moments when the soul becomes quiet enough to hear heaven breathe. That is why the world fights so hard to keep people distracted, because distraction weakens discernment. A busy spirit cannot always recognize divine direction. There are times when God guides us through peace. A deep inner calm settles upon the heart, even when circumstances remain uncertain. And there are times when He guides through restraint, placing uneasiness within us when something is not aligned with His will. But to recognize those moments, we must stay connected to Him. Prayer is not merely asking God for things. Prayer is learning His heart. It is learning how to walk closely enough beside Him that His whispers become familiar. Seeking divine guidance also requires patience, and patience is one of the hardest disciplines for the human spirit. We live in a generation addicted to speed. People want immediate answers, instant success, overnight transformation. Yet God often works slowly because hurried souls rarely grow deeply. Some answers unfold over time. Some directions become clear only after obedience takes the first trembling step forward. Think about how often fear disguises itself as wisdom. Fear says, stay where you are, do not risk disappointment, do not trust again, do not move. But divine guidance does not flow from fear. God may lead you carefully, but He does not lead you into bondage. His direction brings life, growth, and peace even when the journey requires courage. And sometimes the greatest challenge is not hearing God's guidance, but accepting it. Because there are moments when His direction will not match our desires. We may pray for ease while He leads us toward growth. We may ask for immediate blessings while He prepares our character first. We may beg Him to remove the mountain while He strengthens us to climb it. Yet every divine instruction carries purpose hidden within it. There are people today standing at crossroads they never expected to face. A mother wondering how to protect her children in uncertain times. A weary worker praying over financial burdens. A grieving heart trying to rebuild after loss. A young soul searching for purpose in a confusing world. And in all these places, God still speaks. He speaks through scripture that suddenly feels alive, through unexpected wisdom arriving at the perfect moment, through doors that open with peace and doors that close despite every effort, through gentle conviction that stirs the conscience, through prayers answered in ways too precise to be coincidence. But seeking God's guidance means more than asking for direction once and then returning to self-will. It means living with continual dependence upon Him. It means waking each morning aware that we need His wisdom again today. Yesterday's guidance cannot fully carry tomorrow's battles. Daily bread is still necessary for daily living. There is something deeply beautiful about a life surrendered to divine leading. Such a life becomes less anxious because it understands that God already sees what tomorrow contains. The future no longer feels like a terrifying mystery when placed into the hands of an all-knowing Creator. That does not mean challenges disappear. It means the soul walks through them differently. When God guides your decisions, you begin to notice how many disasters His mercy quietly prevented. The relationship that ended before it destroyed you. The opportunity that slipped away because it was never meant to sustain you. The delay that protected you from moving too soon. Sometimes unanswered prayers are actually hidden forms of divine protection. And still there will be moments when guidance feels unclear. Moments when heaven seems silent and the road ahead disappears into uncertainty. Those seasons can test faith deeply. Yet even silence has purpose. Sometimes God allows us to sit in uncertainty so we will learn to trust His presence instead of depending only upon visible signs. Beloved, you do not have to know every answer today. You simply need to remain willing to follow the one who does. God is not asking you to carry the burden of controlling your future. He is asking you to walk closely enough with Him that your heart becomes teachable. A teachable spirit can be redirected. A hardened spirit resists wisdom and suffers unnecessarily. Seeking divine guidance also transforms the way we treat others. When God leads our hearts, compassion grows where judgment once lived. Wisdom replaces recklessness. Grace softens harshness. We begin to understand that every person we encounter carries unseen battles, hidden griefs, and silent prayers. Divine guidance shapes not only our decisions but our character. And perhaps the greatest blessing of all is this: God never grows weary of guiding his children. Human beings may become impatient with our questions, but heaven remains patient with our process. Again and again, God reaches toward wandering hearts with mercy. Again and again, he lights paths in darkness. Again and again, he reminds us that we are not abandoned. So before you rush into this day, pause long enough to seek him. Before making decisions, invite him into the room. Before speaking words you cannot take back, ask for wisdom. Before following emotions that shift like wind, ask for discernment. Let prayer become your compass instead of your last resort. For there is peace waiting in divine guidance. There is safety in walking where God leads. There is strength in knowing that your life is not being directed by accident, fear, or chance alone. And one day, when you look back over the winding roads of your life, you will see that God was guiding you even in moments when you thought you were lost. His hand was steady through every valley. His wisdom was shaping every delay. His love was protecting every fragile piece of your soul. Because the God who created your future is fully capable of leading you into it one faithful step at a time. Fear has a voice. It speaks in the middle of the night when the world is silent and the heart is tired. It whispers that you are not strong enough, not worthy enough, not prepared enough for the road ahead. Fear studies your scars and tries to convince you that brokenness is your permanent name. It sits beside hospital beds, lingers behind overdue bills, trembles inside uncertain futures, and presses heavily upon hearts already weary from carrying too much for too long. And yet, even with all its noise, fear has never been greater than God. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when a choice must be made. Not a choice between comfort and struggle, because life will hold both. Not a choice between sunshine and storms, because every living heart will experience seasons of rain. The real choice is whether we will allow fear to lead us or whether we will rise each day determined to walk by faith. Faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is moving forward while fear still trembles in the background. Faith is hearing the thunder and believing there is still a rainbow hidden somewhere beyond the clouds. Faith is planting seeds in seasons that look barren. It is praying while tears still stain the cheeks. It is believing God's promises even when circumstances seem to argue against them. Too many beautiful souls have spent years imprisoned by fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of beginning again. Fear can make people shrink themselves until they no longer recognize the greatness God placed within them. It can silence voices meant to speak life. It can stop dreams before they ever have the chance to breathe. Fear builds invisible cages around hearts that were created to soar freely beneath heaven's grace. But beloved, fear was never meant to become your master. The Lord did not create you merely to survive each day trembling beneath anxiety. He created you to walk boldly through life knowing that His hand rests upon you. Even when the road grows uncertain, even when the valley stretches longer than expected, God remains faithful. There are people today who have become so accustomed to fear that they mistake it for wisdom. They call their fear caution. They call their fear realism. They call their fear preparation. But deep inside, many are simply afraid to trust God beyond the boundaries of what feels safe. Fear will always urge you to stay where you are. Faith will gently call you toward growth. Fear says, what if everything falls apart? Faith whispers, what if God holds everything together? Fear counts obstacles. Faith remembers promises. Fear studies the size of the mountain. Faith remembers the power of the Creator who formed the mountain itself. And still, walking in faith is not always easy. Some mornings the soul wakes up carrying yesterday's disappointments like heavy chains. There are seasons when prayers seem unanswered and heaven feels silent. In those moments, fear tries hardest to convince us that God has forgotten us. But silence does not mean abandonment. A seed beneath the ground experiences darkness before it ever touches sunlight. Yet hidden growth is still taking place beneath the soil. In the same way, God is often working in places our eyes cannot yet see. Faith means trusting that divine movement continues even when visible evidence has not yet appeared. The women and men who changed history were rarely fearless people. They were faithful people. They walked trembling sometimes. They doubted sometimes. They cried sometimes. Yet they kept moving because something greater than fear burned inside their spirits. Think about the mother praying over her children while uncertainty surrounds the future. Think about the weary worker continuing to believe for provision despite financial struggle. Think about the grieving soul learning how to breathe again after devastating loss. Faith is not always loud. Sometimes faith looks like simply getting up one more morning and trusting God to provide enough strength for another day. And perhaps that is what makes faith so holy. It rises in ordinary people living through extraordinary burdens. Fear has a way of magnifying problems until they appear larger than God himself. But beloved, no storm has ever surprised heaven. No diagnosis, no betrayal, no failure, no heartbreak has ever caused God to lose control of the story. The Lord sees the beginning and the ending all at once. What feels like chaos to us is never chaos to him. Walking in faith means surrendering the need to control every outcome. Human beings often cling desperately to certainty because uncertainty feels dangerous. But faith teaches the soul another way to live. It says, even if I cannot see the entire path, I trust the one guiding my steps. And oh, how beautiful a faithful heart becomes. It develops resilience the world cannot understand. Storms may bend it, but they do not destroy it. Trials may wound it, but they do not steal its hope. A faithful soul learns that peace is not found in perfect circumstances. Peace is found in the presence of God walking beside us through imperfect ones. There will always be reasons to fear. The world offers endless opportunities for worry, yet fear and faith cannot sit upon the throne of the heart at the same time. One will eventually overpower the other. That is why daily prayer matters. Prayer reminds the soul who truly holds power. Prayer lifts our eyes above temporary struggles and reconnects us to eternal promises. When fear fills the mind with darkness, prayer opens windows for light to enter again. Some people believe faith means pretending pain does not exist. But real faith is honest. It admits when the heart is hurting. It acknowledges grief and disappointment without surrendering completely to despair. Faith says, I am wounded, but I still believe God heals. I am uncertain, but I still trust God guides. I am afraid, but I will not let fear decide my future. And there are moments when faith requires waiting, which can feel harder than moving. Waiting stretches the soul. It teaches patience in a world addicted to immediacy. Fear grows restless during waiting seasons. It screams that nothing is changing, that prayers are useless, that hope is foolish. But faith continues believing even before visible evidence arrives. Beloved, do not underestimate the strength growing inside you during seasons of waiting. Roots deepen underground long before fruit appears above the surface. Walking in faith also means releasing the burdens God never asked you to carry. Fear convinces people they must solve everything alone. But God did not design your shoulders to bear the weight of the entire world. Some battles belong to Him. Some doors only He can open. Some healing only heaven can restore. And when you finally surrender those burdens, something remarkable happens inside the soul. Breathing becomes easier. Hope begins to rise again. The future no longer feels like an enemy waiting to destroy you. Instead, it becomes sacred ground where God's grace has already gone ahead of you. There are blessings fear would have caused you to miss entirely. Relationships that required vulnerability. Opportunities that required courage. Healing that required trust. Purpose that required obedience. Fear would have kept you trapped inside smallness. But faith invites you into abundance. Not abundance measured merely by money or possessions, but abundance of peace, joy, courage, wisdom, and spiritual freedom. The enemy of your soul wants you paralyzed by fear because fearful hearts rarely step fully into their calling. But God did not create you to spend your days imprisoned by anxiety and doubt. He created you to live with confidence rooted not in human strength, but in divine presence. And yes, there will still be hard days. Faith does not erase human struggle, but it changes how we walk through struggle. Instead of collapsing beneath fear, we lean into God's strength. Instead of allowing darkness to define us, we keep reaching toward light. So this morning, beloved, choose faith again. Even if your voice shakes while praying, even if tears still fall while believing, even if the future remains unclear, walk anyway, trust anyway, hope anyway, because the God who carried you through yesterday's storms is still holding you today. And every step taken in faith becomes a testimony that fear did not win. One day you will look back over the valleys you survived, the battles you endured, the nights you thought would break you, and you will realize something powerful. God was faithful through all of it. And the very fears that once threatened to destroy you became the places where faith learned how to rise. Morning arrives quietly before most people are ready to receive it. The world slowly stretches awake. Birds begin their sacred songs beyond the windows. Light slips gently across the floor, as if heaven itself were placing a tender hand upon the shoulders of the weary. And yet for many souls, peace does not arrive with the sunrise. Anxiety wakes before the alarm clock. Worry rises before the feet touch the ground. Heavy thoughts gather like storm clouds around hearts already exhausted from yesterday's battles. There are mornings when the spirit feels bruised before the day has even begun. Some wake carrying grief that has no language. Others rise burdened by responsibilities too large for human strength alone. Some lie staring at the ceiling, wondering how they will survive another difficult season. And in a world overflowing with noise, pressure, and uncertainty, peace has become something many people search for, but few truly experience. Yet there is a holy invitation hidden inside every sunrise. An invitation not merely to begin another day, but to begin it with God. Morning prayer is more than routine words whispered out of habit. It is the soul returning home before the demands of life begin pulling at it from every direction. It is choosing to sit with heaven before sitting with fear. It is allowing God's presence to steady the heart before the world tries to unsettle it again. There is something deeply healing about speaking to God while the day is still fresh and untouched. Before the phone rings, before bad news arrives, before the schedules grow crowded, morning prayer reminds the spirit that peace is not found in circumstances alone. Peace is found in divine presence. Beloved, the world teaches people to rush, to hurry from one responsibility to another without ever becoming still enough to breathe deeply. But prayer slows the soul down long enough to remember what truly matters. It reminds us that we are not machines created merely to perform. We are human beings with fragile hearts, eternal spirits, and a desperate need for God's guidance. Some people begin their mornings feeding fear before feeding faith. They wake immediately to troubling headlines, endless worries, and comparisons that quietly poison joy. But imagine beginning instead with prayer. Imagine opening the day not with panic but with surrender, not with dread but with trust. Prayer changes the atmosphere of the heart. It does not always remove every problem immediately. Bills may still need to be paid. Grief may still ache. Challenges may still wait ahead. But prayer strengthens the soul to face those realities without collapsing beneath them. It reminds us that we do not walk into the day alone. There is a sacred stillness that comes when a person bows their heart before God in the early hours. The burdens that seemed unbearable begin to loosen their grip. The racing thoughts grow quieter. The spirit remembers that heaven remains in control even when life feels uncertain. Morning prayer is an act of trust. It says, Lord, before I face anything else today, I choose to face you first. And oh, how desperately this world needs peaceful souls. Too many people are walking around emotionally starved, spiritually exhausted, mentally overwhelmed. Smiles hide silent suffering. Busy schedules conceal lonely hearts. Some have forgotten what inner calm even feels like because anxiety has become their constant companion. But God never intended fear to dominate his children. Peace is not weakness. Peace is strength resting in God. The kind of peace prayer brings cannot always be explained logically. It arrives quietly in the middle of chaos. It steadies trembling hearts during uncertain seasons. It holds grieving souls together when life feels shattered. Sometimes nothing around you changes immediately, yet something inside you becomes anchored. That is the miracle of prayer. There are mornings when tears become the prayer because words feel too heavy to form. And still God listens. He hears the cries hidden behind silence. He understands burdens human language cannot fully describe. Heaven is never deaf to sincere hearts. Perhaps that is why morning prayer matters so deeply. Before the world tells you who you should be, prayer reminds you whose you are. Before fear begins speaking lies, prayer reconnects you with truth. Before discouragement settles into the spirit, prayer pours fresh hope into weary places. And beloved, peace does not always come suddenly like thunder. Sometimes it arrives gently like sunlight spreading slowly across the horizon. Little by little, prayer softens hardened worry. Little by little, faith becomes stronger than fear. Little by little, the soul learns how to rest again. There are people listening today who have carried anxiety for so long that peace feels unfamiliar. You have lived in survival mode. Every day has felt like another mountain to climb, another storm to endure. But God did not create your spirit to remain trapped in constant turmoil. He longs to give rest to weary hearts, not temporary escape, real peace. The kind of peace that remains steady even when circumstances are shaking. Morning prayer creates sacred space for that peace to grow. It teaches the heart how to breathe again. It reminds us that we are more than our struggles. We are held by a God who watches over every detail of our lives. And there is something powerful about surrendering the entire day before it even unfolds. Saying, Lord, guide my words today, guard my heart today, strengthen my mind today, walk beside me today. Such prayers invite heaven into ordinary hours. Too often people wait until life falls apart before they pray seriously. Yet prayer was never meant to become merely an emergency response. It is meant to become daily communion, a continual returning to the presence of God. The most peaceful souls are not people without problems. They are people who have learned where to carry their problems. Some carry burdens alone until bitterness forms inside them. Others numb themselves with distractions. But prayer teaches us to release burdens into capable hands. God does not grow weary of listening. He does not become impatient with wounded hearts. Again and again, he invites his children to come near. Morning prayer also strengthens discernment. In quiet moments with God, wisdom begins to rise above emotional confusion. Decisions become clearer. Perspective changes. Problems that once looked overwhelming become smaller beneath the greatness of God. And still, prayer is not always polished. Some mornings it may simply be, Lord, help me. Some mornings faith may feel fragile. Some mornings exhaustion may outweigh eloquence, but sincerity matters more to God than perfection. A broken whisper offered honestly to heaven carries tremendous power. There is beauty in beginning the day dependent upon God instead of pretending self-sufficiency. The world celebrates independence, but the soul flourishes through divine connection. Prayer reminds us that strength does not come solely from human effort. True strength flows from God's presence renewing us daily. And beloved, there will be mornings when peace feels distant despite your prayers. Do not lose heart in those moments. Seeds planted consistently in prayer still grow beneath the surface. Even when emotions fluctuate, God remains near. Peace is not always measured by feelings alone. Sometimes peace is simply continuing to trust God despite emotional storms. The faithful soul keeps praying, keeps believing, keeps showing up before God morning after morning, and slowly something changes within. Fear loses some of its power. Hope rises more naturally. Gratitude begins blooming even in difficult seasons. The spirit becomes less shaken by temporary troubles because it has learned how to anchor itself in eternal truth. Morning prayer also reminds us that each new day is mercy. No matter how painful yesterday may have been, sunrise still arrives carrying another opportunity for grace, another chance to begin again, another moment to place our lives into God's hands. What a gift that is. To know that failure is not final, that heartbreak is not the end of the story, that God still meets us at dawn with compassion fresh and new. So before the noise of this world consumes your attention today, pause long enough to pray. Sit quietly with God. Let His presence settle your racing thoughts. Let His love reach the frightened places within you. Let His peace become stronger than your panic. Because when prayer becomes the foundation of the morning, peace begins to follow the soul throughout the day. And one day you will look back over the hardest seasons of your life and realize that those quiet mornings spent praying carried you farther than your own strength ever could. Those whispered conversations with heaven sustained you. Those sacred moments of surrender kept your spirit alive. For the God who listens at sunrise is the same God who walks beside you through every hour that follows. And in His presence, weary hearts can finally learn how to rest. There are dangers we never see. Battles fought on our behalf without announcement. Storms redirected before they ever reached our doorsteps. There are moments when heaven quietly steps between us and destruction, while we remain completely unaware of what could have been. And perhaps one of the greatest acts of faith is learning to recognize that God's protection is often working even when life appears ordinary. Too many people believe protection only looks like dramatic rescue. They expect thunder from heaven, visible miracles, unmistakable signs. But often God protects in quieter ways. A delayed departure that prevents disaster. A closed door that saves us from heartbreak. A relationship that ends before it destroys our peace. An uneasy feeling that keeps us from walking into danger. Divine protection does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it moves softly, like unseen hands guiding us away from what would have wounded the soul. Beloved, if you could see all the times God has protected you without your knowledge, your heart would overflow with gratitude beyond words. There were nights you thought you were alone, yet angels stood guard around your life. There were seasons when confusion frustrated you, but God was shielding you from paths never meant for you. There were prayers that seemed unanswered, when in truth heaven was protecting you from blessings that would have become burdens before their time. Human understanding is limited. We often judge situations only by immediate feelings. We mourn losses that later reveal themselves as mercy. We resist detours, not realizing they are saving us from unseen collisions ahead. But God sees the full journey while we see only fragments of the road. And because He loves His children deeply, His protection travels with us even into places where fear tries hardest to grow. There are people waking this morning carrying heavy anxiety about the future. Fear whispers endless possibilities of what might go wrong. It tells weary hearts that they must survive every battle through their own strength alone. But beloved, God has never abandoned His own. Through every valley, every storm, every wilderness season, His protective hand remains steady. That does not mean life becomes free from pain. Even protected souls experience heartbreak, disappointment, and trials. Yet there is a difference between being attacked and being abandoned. God never promised a journey without difficulty, but He did promise His presence within it. The child learning to walk may stumble many times, yet the loving parent still watches closely. In the same way, God watches over our lives with care deeper than human language can fully express. Sometimes His protection appears through wisdom, a quiet conviction telling you not to move too quickly, a persistent feeling urging caution, a restless spirit when something is not aligned with peace. Heaven often protects us through discernment long before danger fully reveals itself. But too often people ignore those sacred warnings because emotions are louder than wisdom. We rush toward things that glitter temporarily while overlooking the still, small voice of God guiding us elsewhere. And then later, after heartbreak arrives, we finally understand what divine love was trying to spare us from all along. Recognizing God's protection requires spiritual awareness. It requires slowing down enough to notice His fingerprints upon ordinary life. The truth is, many miracles go unnoticed simply because people are too distracted to recognize them. Every breath is mercy. Every sunrise is grace. Every narrow escape is evidence that God still watches over His children. There are moments in life when we look back and realize how close we came to destruction. A decision that could have ruined us. A path that could have consumed our peace. A season that nearly broke our spirit completely. Yet somehow, through circumstances we did not fully understand at the time, God carried us through. And perhaps that is one of the holiest forms of worship. Remembering how God protected us when we were too weak to protect ourselves. Remembering how He sustained us through seasons we thought would destroy us. Remembering how His mercy covered us even while we struggled to trust Him fully. Fear has a way of making people forget past faithfulness. Anxiety narrows vision until the heart sees only present trouble. But when we remember God's protection throughout our lives, faith begins rising again. We realize that the same God who carried us yesterday remains capable of carrying us today. Beloved, some of you survived things that should have destroyed your hope completely. Betrayal tried to harden your heart. Grief tried to steal your joy. Failure tried to convince you to give up. Yet here you are, still breathing, still praying, still seeking God despite everything life has placed upon your shoulders. That is not weakness, that is grace protecting your soul. And protection is not always physical alone. Sometimes God protects the mind from breaking beneath unbearable pressure. Sometimes He protects the spirit from becoming permanently bitter after disappointment. Sometimes He protects purpose itself, preserving the calling placed upon your life even through painful seasons. The enemy may attack, but God still sustains. There is deep comfort in knowing that we do not journey through life abandoned to chance. The world may feel uncertain. Headlines may stir fear, human systems may fail, but above all earthly instability stands a faithful God whose eyes never stop watching over His children. When you truly understand divine protection, gratitude changes the way you live. You stop taking small mercies for granted. You begin recognizing that not every blessing arrives wrapped in ease. Sometimes protection itself is the blessing. A delayed answer can be protection. A painful ending can be protection. An unexpected interruption can be protection. Even loneliness in certain seasons may be God shielding you while preparing your heart for something healthier. And still there are moments when life wounds us despite God's protection. Those moments can confuse the soul deeply. We ask, Lord, if you were protecting me, why did this pain still happen? Yet protection does not always mean the absence of suffering. Sometimes it means suffering did not consume you completely. The fire came, but it did not destroy your faith. The storm arrived, but it did not erase God's presence. The valley grew dark, but it did not become your permanent home. God's protection often reveals itself not in avoiding every hardship, but in sustaining us through hardships that should have shattered us entirely. Look at your own life. There were moments you thought you would never recover from. Nights when tears soaked the pillow and hope seemed distant beyond reach, yet somehow morning still came. Strength returned little by little. Healing began slowly. That was not merely human resilience. That was grace holding you together when your own strength could not. Beloved, heaven has guarded your life more times than you realize. And because God's protection is constant, you do not have to live enslaved by fear. Fear will always imagine worst-case scenarios. It will always try to convince you that disaster waits around every corner. But faith remembers that God walks ahead of us, already aware of tomorrow's challenges. Nothing surprises Him. Nothing catches heaven unprepared. The road may contain uncertainty for us, but it remains fully visible to God. That truth brings peace to anxious hearts. We may not know what this day holds, but we know who holds us. and the one guiding us is faithful enough to protect what belongs to him. There is also wisdom in cooperating with God's protection. Some people pray for safety while continuously ignoring wisdom. Divine protection is not permission for reckless living. God often protects through common sense, discernment, healthy boundaries, and obedience. Listening matters. Humility matters. Awareness matters. A heart submitted to God becomes more sensitive to his guidance. It learns to recognize when peace is absent. It learns not to force doors open merely because impatience demands immediate results. It learns to trust that what God withholds may be just as loving as what he provides. And perhaps the greatest comfort of all is this: even when we cannot trace God's protection clearly, his love remains unwavering. Parents may fail, friends may disappoint, human promises may collapse, but God's watchful care never sleeps. The psalmist once spoke of a God who neither slumbers nor sleeps. And what a beautiful promise that is for weary souls. While we rest, heaven still watches. While we struggle, heaven still cares. While we walk through uncertain seasons, God's presence remains near. So today, beloved, pause long enough to recognize his protection along your journey. Remember the doors he closed. Remember the storms you survived. Remember the moments grace carried you farther than your own strength could have gone. And walk into this day, not trembling with fear, but strengthened by the knowledge that God still surrounds your life with mercy. For the same God who protected you yesterday is already waiting in tomorrow, preparing grace for every step ahead.